What if a major national investigation was quietly redirected just as it began to uncover deeper questions? That's the debate now unfolding in Washington, where emerging reports suggest that internal disagreements within U.S. intelligence agencies may have influenced how far an inquiry into Charlie Kirk's assassination was allowed to go. This story is about procedure, authority, and the limits of transparency within government, and it's one that continues to raise quiet but serious questions. Stay tuned, and don't forget to subscribe for continuing updates. In the months following the tragic shooting of Charlie Kirk during a university speaking event, the official investigation focused primarily on the immediate suspect, Tyler Robinson, who was quickly arrested and charged. Yet behind closed doors, intelligence and law enforcement agencies reportedly engaged in a broader discussion. Could there have been more to this case than a single actor? That question, according to officials familiar with internal deliberations, sparked both collaboration and conflict among key figures tasked with safeguarding national security. At the center of this internal debate were two senior officials, Joe Kent, head of the National Counterterrorism Center, NCDC, and Kash Patel, a senior national security advisor with broad oversight authority. Both are experienced in intelligence coordination, yet their interpretations of how to handle the Kirk investigation diverged sharply. Kent's team reportedly began a standard review to determine whether any external influence or coordination, foreign or domestic, might have intersected with the events surrounding the attack. According to several accounts, this was intended not to assign blame, but to ensure that all possibilities were responsibly examined before conclusions were finalized. Kash Patel, however, viewed Kent's move differently. Sources indicate that Patel expressed concern that the review risked crossing into an active FBI investigation, potentially complicating ongoing legal proceedings. In Patel's view, preserving the integrity of a criminal case required strict adherence to jurisdictional boundaries and minimal overlap between agencies. For Kent, on the other hand, cross-agency coordination was an essential safeguard, particularly when the event involved a public figure with broad political visibility. This difference in interpretation may sound procedural, but within Washington's security circles, it carried deep implications. When one agency's initiative is viewed as overreach and another's caution is seen as obstruction, cooperation can falter. That's what appears to have happened here. Patel's reported directive to limit the NCDC's review created frustration among intelligence analysts who believed their mandate required them to exhaust every potential lead. Meanwhile, FBI officials reportedly appreciated the restraint, arguing that premature overlap could jeopardize their casework against Robinson. The disagreement culminated in what multiple reports describe as a tense White House meeting. Present were Patel, Kent, former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, Vice President J.D. Vance, Chief of Staff Susie Willies, and senior Department of Justice officials. The discussion focused not on guilt or blame but on protocol, who had authority to pursue what lines of inquiry and under what circumstances. Those familiar with the meeting describe it as controlled but strained, with both Kent and Patel defending their positions vigorously. The result, according to accounts, was not a resolution but a stalemate. Kent's review would pause, pending further legal clarification. This moment of administrative friction revealed something larger about the nature of modern intelligence work. In theory, the U.S. system of multiple agencies, each with distinct jurisdictions, is designed to create checks and balances. In practice, however, those same divisions can lead to hesitation or conflict when investigations touch politically sensitive territory. Officials must weigh the pursuit of truth against the risk of appearing to interfere with criminal or political processes. It's a delicate balance, and one that often unfolds away from public view. The purpose of Kent's initial review, according to people familiar with counterterrorism procedure, was to identify any potential indicators of outside influence, such as suspicious communications, financial patterns, or digital signals, linked to the accused. Analysts were not necessarily investigating a foreign plot but rather ensuring that no broader network or external factor had played a role. Such precautions are standard after incidents involving public figures, as they help confirm that national security protocols remain intact. Nevertheless, even a routine intelligence review can raise sensitivities when it overlaps with a criminal case already under public scrutiny. Federal agencies are particularly cautious about evidence sharing, as information obtained through intelligence channels is not always admissible in court. That legal barrier can make cooperation between the FBI and intelligence bodies complex. For some officials, this legal caution explains Patel's hesitation. For others, the pause on the review felt premature, especially given the high-profile nature of the event. One of the more intriguing elements of this story is how the perception of intent shaped the response. Kent's supporters describe him as methodical, someone committed to due diligence, and unwilling to leave questions unanswered. They argue that his work was entirely procedural, consistent with his role overseeing the nation's counterterrorism coordination efforts. Patel's supporters, by contrast, emphasize the importance of order and process. In their view, every investigation has a boundary, and crossing it, no matter how well-intentioned, can create confusion or legal complications. In the aftermath of the White House meeting, administration officials reportedly grew increasingly cautious about how information related to the case was shared. Internal memoranda emphasized the importance of message discipline and coordination between agencies. The goal was to prevent speculation that could distort public understanding or undermine confidence in the judicial process. Privately, however, some analysts expressed disappointment that potential avenues of inquiry were being narrowed before reaching conclusive findings. The underlying tension here reflects a broader challenge in the U.S. intelligence community: the intersection of law enforcement, intelligence gathering, and political sensitivity. When an event involves a prominent figure, agencies must navigate heightened scrutiny from both the media and policymakers. In such environments, even procedural decisions like whether to pursue a certain lead can be interpreted through a political lens. That perception, accurate or not, can discourage transparency and stifle collaboration. Reports indicate that Kent's team had begun examining a range of contextual factors, including whether online activity or digital disinformation campaigns might have amplified tensions leading up to the incident. These lines of inquiry did not assert direct foreign involvement. Rather, they explored whether broader patterns of influence might have indirectly shaped narratives or behaviors. Intelligence experts often describe this kind of review as environmental analysis, an effort to understand how digital ecosystems, ideology, and cross-border communication can affect domestic incidents. However, once the discussion reached senior political levels, the risks of misinterpretation became clear. Even mentioning foreign influence, however tentatively, can create unintended diplomatic or legal consequences. For that reason, White House advisors reportedly urged restraint until investigators could verify any preliminary findings with absolute certainty. Some officials worried that ambiguous intelligence could be misconstrued publicly or in court, complicating both prosecution and international relations. This caution, while understandable, fueled speculation among intelligence observers that the administration might be prioritizing optics over inquiry. Critics argued that prematurely curbing an internal review could signal a reluctance to confront uncomfortable questions, even if only to rule them out. Defenders countered that discipline and precision are essential in sensitive cases, where premature conclusions could do lasting damage to public trust. The divide between those perspectives is emblematic of how fragile coordination can become in moments of crisis. Historically, major investigations have often faced similar tensions, whether between intelligence and law enforcement or between agencies and political leadership. Each institution has its own culture, responsibilities, and thresholds for risk. The result is a system that prizes caution but sometimes struggles to communicate across its own boundaries. As the Kirk case evolved, the jurisdictional disagreements became more apparent. The FBI maintained control over the criminal investigation, while the National Counterterrorism Center's role was more interpretive, analyzing broader patterns and ensuring that potential external elements were fully considered. Yet, as one official described it, the overlap became a gray zone. In that gray zone, decisions about access, authority, and timing became sources of tension rather than cooperation. Today, it remains unclear whether any of Kent's initial findings were ever fully explored. Both the FBI and Department of Justice have reiterated that their investigations remain comprehensive, though neither has commented directly on the scope of interagency cooperation. The NCTC, for its part, has maintained a characteristically quiet posture, citing confidentiality and the need to protect classified processes. This silence, while standard for such cases, has left observers with lingering questions about whether key intelligence leads were temporarily set aside or quietly reassigned. Beyond the specifics of this case, the story highlights the difficulties of balancing transparency with national security. Intelligence work, by nature, operates in secrecy, but public trust depends on accountability. When major cases involve political figures, the need for careful communication becomes even greater. Officials must navigate public expectation for answers while ensuring that disclosure doesn't compromise investigations or national interests. It's a tightrope few institutions walk comfortably. The Kirk investigation underscores how internal disagreements, even when rooted in good faith, can shape the direction of sensitive inquiries. Behind every official statement and classified review lies a network of individuals navigating the boundaries between diligence and restraint. Within that tension, the story of this case unfolds not only as a question of evidence, but as an illustration of how institutions manage uncertainty under public scrutiny. At the center of the discussions were two officials whose differing philosophies reflected legitimate but competing priorities. Kent's insistence on a comprehensive review came from a belief that every lead deserved attention and that credibility depended on leaving no question unexamined. Patel's approach emphasized discipline, caution, and adherence to procedure, an outlook shaped by experience in managing politically delicate matters and ensuring that no investigation exceeded its legal boundaries. Each perspective carried weight. Neither approach was wrong. They simply represented different interpretations of the same responsibility to protect both the integrity of the inquiry and the trust placed in their institutions. The disagreement that followed was often described publicly as a clash of personalities, yet those close to the process suggest it was less about individuals and more about design. The intelligence system itself is intentionally built with overlapping authorities so that no single office can act without checks and oversight. This arrangement, meant to prevent unilateral decisions, can sometimes slow progress. What is intended as a safeguard can, under pressure, feel like an obstacle. The resulting friction is not always evidence of dysfunction. It can also be a sign that the system is working as intended, though imperfectly. To outside observers, the delays that followed might have appeared as hesitation or even inaction. Inside the system, however, those pauses reflected a culture of caution. Intelligence inquiries move slowly for reasons both practical and ethical. Classified material must be verified, jurisdictional boundaries must be respected, and conclusions must rest on evidence that can withstand scrutiny. The process is deliberate by design. What appears motionless from the outside is often a series of careful steps being taken behind closed doors. For analysts and investigators directly involved, such caution can be frustrating. Many within the intelligence community believe that the most effective investigations are those that allow collaboration without fear of political consequence, environments where professionals can pursue evidence wherever it leads, guided solely by analysis rather than perception. Yet this ideal is difficult to achieve. Every decision, every document, and every assessment carries potential implications beyond the classified sphere. When an inquiry touches on politically sensitive territory, the instinct to proceed carefully grows stronger. Intelligence work resists simplicity. The information that matters most often arrives in fragments that take months to assemble and verify. The process requires patience and, above all, discretion. That discretion, while essential, can give rise to public uncertainty and speculation. The tension between transparency and confidentiality is one that every democratic institution must manage carefully. Too much secrecy erodes trust. Too much openness can compromise operations. Finding the right balance is an ongoing challenge, not a single decision. Months after the early disagreements drew attention, quiet progress reportedly began to take shape. Interagency briefings resumed, and communication lines between departments were gradually strengthened. While officials have avoided confirming whether a specific inquiry into potential external influence was formally restarted, several sources familiar with related operations indicate that broader assessments, focused on digital interference, extremist messaging, and information security are now active across multiple agencies. These developments suggest that lessons were learned from earlier tensions, even if such adjustments were never formally announced. This kind of course correction is common in intelligence work. Public acknowledgement is rare, but procedural improvements often signal an internal reckoning. Re-establishing coordination channels, redefining communication protocols, and setting clearer expectations can all serve as quiet forms of institutional repair. The outcome is less about vindication and more about adaptation, a gradual effort to ensure that similar disputes do not hinder future inquiries. Ultimately, the questions raised by this case reach beyond the individuals involved. They speak to the broader challenge of how institutions uphold both vigilance and restraint in equal measure. How should intelligence agencies balance the need for thorough investigation with the responsibility to avoid overreach? How should leaders act when inquiries intersect with political sensitivity? And how can public confidence be preserved when the most critical processes necessarily take place out of sight? These are not abstract dilemmas. They define the structure of democratic intelligence. Every agency operates under dual imperatives to pursue the truth while protecting civil order. This duality explains why progress can be slow. The architecture of oversight, built over decades to prevent excess, also limits unilateral action. Within that structure, even well-intentioned disagreements can lead to hesitation. What appears as contradiction may simply be the price of accountability. The Kirk investigation, viewed in this light, has become a reflection of that balance. It demonstrates both the durability and the vulnerability of the system that governs national security decisions. The same framework that ensures legality and fairness can also make swift responses difficult. Yet the continuing debate among officials and analysts about how best to manage such situations may be a sign of institutional health rather than weakness. A system willing to re-examine its methods, even under pressure, shows that it remains self-aware and capable of adjustment. In recent years, agencies have increasingly focused on improving coordination across departments, particularly where digital threats and cross-border influences are involved. These efforts, while rarely publicized, represent an evolving understanding of how complex modern intelligence has become. The Kirk case, by highlighting the friction that can arise between diligence and control, may have indirectly encouraged more transparent frameworks for collaboration. Even without dramatic policy announcements, subtle shifts in practice often reveal that the lessons of controversy are being absorbed. As the official investigation continues, guided by established legal procedures, cooperation among agencies appears to have strengthened. Whether any external links will ever be substantiated remains uncertain, but the impact of the process itself is already visible in the way intelligence professionals discuss coordination, evidence standards, and communication. For many working within those systems, the case has become a reminder that the process, how decisions are reached and how disagreements are managed, is as significant as any conclusion. The legacy of this story may therefore lie less in what was discovered than in what it revealed about institutional culture. It has offered a candid view of how government bodies respond when authority is shared, priorities conflict, and public expectations rise. It has shown that restraint and action are not opposites, but complementary tools that must be balanced with care. It has also shown that internal disagreement, far from being a sign of instability, can sometimes signal that oversight is functioning as it should. Public trust depends on that balance. In a time when confidence in major institutions often fluctuates, the reminder that accountability and patience can coexist is an important one. The public's desire for answers is natural, especially when the issues at stake touch on security and transparency. Yet those answers, to be meaningful, must come through verified evidence rather than assumption. The search for truth in complex investigations is rarely straightforward. It involves waiting, revising, and often confronting uncomfortable uncertainty. The story of the Kirk investigation continues to evolve quietly. Updates are infrequent, and much of the work remains classified, but the patterns of communication and cooperation emerging in its aftermath suggest that the institutions involved have learned from their own experience. That evolution, though gradual, may prove to be the case's most enduring outcome. It underscores how governance is less about decisive moments than about continuous recalibration, how every challenge can serve as a test of an institution's resilience and commitment to self-correction. In this context, the absence of public drama should not be mistaken for indifference. Behind every pause in communication or delay in announcement lies an intricate process of verification, coordination, and legal review. Each decision to release or withhold information represents a balance between transparency and protection. These unseen deliberations, though invisible to most citizens, are essential to maintaining both national security and democratic accountability. For many professionals who watch the case unfold, the real lesson is about endurance, the willingness to sustain inquiry despite frustration, to maintain cooperation even when perspectives differ, and to trust that integrity in process ultimately matters more than the speed of resolution. That endurance is what sustains the credibility of institutions over time. As the months pass, attention may shift elsewhere, but the internal changes inspired by this investigation are likely to remain. Agencies continue to refine their frameworks for coordination, improve their training on managing politically sensitive data, and expand mechanisms for oversight without obstruction. These steps, modest as they may seem, represent progress in a field where perfection is impossible and progress itself must often remain unspoken. The case reminds us that the pursuit of truth within a complex system is not a matter of confrontation but of persistence. Each review, each clarification, and each act of restraint contributes to a larger effort to balance vigilance with fairness. That effort is rarely celebrated publicly, but it forms the quiet foundation of institutional trust. In an era when the public's patience is often tested by the speed of information and the pressure of speculation, the example set by a cautious, methodical investigation can be difficult to appreciate. Yet history suggests that careful processes, though slow, produce outcomes that endure. The Kirk investigation illustrates that lesson vividly. It has become less a story of conflict and more a study of how institutions evolve through introspection. Whatever the final findings may reveal, the process itself stands as a reaffirmation of the principles that define responsible governance: transparency within bounds, coordination without coercion, and accountability sustained by patience. These principles are not easy to uphold, but they are what keep public service credible in moments of uncertainty. For those following the developments, one message remains consistent. The search for truth takes time, and while answers may be delayed, the pursuit itself continues. The value lies not only in resolution but in the careful manner by which the system seeks it. The Kirk case, still unfolding, reminds both officials and citizens that even in the quietest moments, the machinery of accountability is at work, deliberate, imperfect, but persistent in its purpose. For continued updates on this evolving story and for deeper insight into the decision-making behind national investigations, subscribe for future reports that aim to examine these questions with the same commitment to patience, balance, and clarity.